All righty, it is the top of the hour. Good afternoon. You are enrolled in Security 302, Integrating Technology. My name is Susanna Song. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications at Highwire Networks. And for those of you who are joining Overwatch University for the first time, welcome. And for those of you returning, welcome back. We are so happy to see familiar names on the attendee list for this class. Well, our company's cybersecurity platform as a service is called Overwatch. Overwatch is sponsoring this university, and for that we are very grateful for the company's vision and mission to help those of you who are broadening your cybersecurity knowledge so that you can better serve your customers, and also for those of you who see a security career as a golden opportunity. Really quick, before I hand it over to our CISO, Phil Burnett, a few things to keep in mind. There is a reason we just don't share recordings of these courses right off the bat. We want you to feel like you are in a classroom with the full attention of our instructors. And that means if you have questions, we really encourage you to ask them. Go ahead and submit questions in the Q&A section there. There's a button on this platform where you can submit questions. And really, there are no stupid questions. I used to be a journalist, and that was kind of one of the first things that I learned as a young journalist, that there are no stupid questions. And most likely, if you're thinking those questions, or if you're confused or need clarity, there are other people in the room who feel the same way. And don't feel like you have to wait until the very end when we get to the Q&A section to submit questions. Feel free to do it throughout the next half hour. Also, a reminder that your names are kept anonymous, so I won't be exposing anyone during that time. And now for the fun part. I love introducing the instructors because their resumes are quite impressive. And today, as I mentioned, our instructor is Phil Burnett, and he brings 2 decades of executive security experience and credentials to Overwatch. This is his second stint. His second job as CISO, and he's also the force behind our SOC operations at Highwire. During his career, he spent 5 years as HIPAA Chief Security Officer and DICAP Information Assurance Officer for a dental enterprise. Phil has myriads of certifications, including CISSP, CISM, CRISC, GIAC, and GSEC. So if you have a moment later on, you can look up all of those acronyms. It just goes to show that he has a wealth of experience and knowledge, and we are so lucky to have him instruct us today on the topic of how to integrate technologies, which is becoming more challenging for MSPs every day. So without further ado, Phil, thank you so much for being here with us. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Susanna. And can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, very good. All right, that was a quick sound check. Before we dive in too much, I want to talk a little bit about Highwire Networks. Susanna alluded to some of the stuff, but for a little deeper for you folks who may or may not know about us, for about 20 years, Highwire Networks has been a trusted partner to VARs, MSPs, distributors, integrators, and manufacturers in telecom and other services, while minimizing overhead through using extended delivery capabilities around the world. So currently today we have a workforce through a contracted partnership in more than 180 countries. Our newest addition to our program is called Overwatch, as Susanna said, which is a managed security service. And Overwatch provides a practical security foundation for MSPs and partners, VARs, whoever, who are trying to protect themselves and their most important assets, which are their clients. By providing this service to our partners, we allow them to continue to focus their resources on providing the best services they can so their clients, for their clients, while we focus exclusively on delivering the best-in-class security service to them and their clients. So at the end of the day, what's all in it for the MSP? Well, you get security, you get scale, increased revenue margins, and speed. We can start by putting them and their clients in a platform in a matter of a few days. We built the data centers, we provide the analysts and do the heavy lifting. All they get to do is bring the customers and enjoy with us. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about integration of technology. And I'm just going to touch on a few technologies out there that you may or may not be familiar with where they're going. This is not an end-all solution, or it won't talk about every kind of possible scenario solution out there, but hopefully you'll take a nugget with you and maybe research some. And ultimately, my hope is to win over some people into the information security field. There's approximately 500,000 open jobs at any given point prior to COVID-19, that is, in cybersecurity. So meaning that there's a career there. If you like to hunt hunt for things, you like to do puzzles, you like to solve problems, then that's the career you're looking for. And I highly encourage you to check it out even more. So integrating technology. See this guy with his head in his hands? That's the typical CISO saying, oh my God, what am I going to do next? Because all this stuff coming out of me has all these different technologies and integrated, wanting integration and being able to answer questions for whatever the vertical he happens to be in. Earlier in one of our earlier courses, the 301, which is the foundational course, our instructor, Stan Henning, mentioned that any point right now in recent month or so, they did a quick count. There's over 1,200 endpoint solutions alone. So you can pick from 1,200 different endpoints and figure out how to integrate that into your environment. And you can see this guy has a headache and why he has a headache. He just doesn't know where to go. So hopefully I'll be able to help you with asking the right questions. Maybe I'll answer some of the questions that you have, and we can get through this, and it'll be a great day for us all. So typically, why do we need to integrate technology? We increase efficiency, productivity, and solve a problem. So the desire to increase efficiency and productivity by using new technologies is problem solving. So it's related to specific business verticals, and that's one of the first things you have to answer is, what type of business am I trying to help either do my own or your own company, or I'm helping a partner who needs to solve something. Are they healthcare? Are they financial? Is it manufacturing? And then you have to figure out from that, what are the frameworks and things that they're under and the regulations that are driving new technology or driving new solutions, or like in the case of security with new regulations like CCPA, GDPR, and even New York's SHIELD Act. There's a lot of requirements around that where you'll need to have some type of technology or process improvement in order to meet that. And my boss always likes to remind me that, security really isn't a technology problem. It's a business problem, because it's part of a business solution that uses technology to solve problems. And that's pretty profound. So if you think about what are you trying to do, you're not just piling technology upon technology, you're trying to solve problems and increase productivity. So the pace of change is something that we'll talk about a little bit. Maintaining CIA, which is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Confidentiality being that it only the people who need to see it need it, and they're the only ones who get it. The integrity, meaning that the data or the information once created and approved or collected remains the same. It's not changed or altered or tampered with. And for the network folks out there, the availability, that's getting that information in that pristine state, delivered where it needs to be on time, every time. Another thing to consider is what additional skill set you require. Did you budget professional services? Are you in a hurry? Did you have a breach? You have something where you're trying to solve a problem by putting your fingers in the holes in the dam? Or are you actually coming back saying, well, maybe we need to rebuild the dam and make it right the first time? Remember something. When you're doing integrations of technology, if you don't plan properly, failure is a possibility. So another thing to do is build support and value internally. So with your teams, work together to come up with a plan that will deliver effectively the solution that the client needs, or if it's in your own company that your department needs. Include them in planning, testing, and the discussions around that, and measure, and also in developing the impact. So you want to understand if it's good or bad, what those are. So what good looks like, what bad looks like, what success looks like. Once you start, make sure to put the pedal to the metal, because time is not your friend. Time is one of the only things you can't get back. You can buy new services, you can do all the things you need to do, but the hours spent, the cycles spent in deploying a technology. And I'll talk about some samples where I had a difficult time and had to struggle to get things through and what I learned from that. But the reason that, one of the main reasons from an IT security perspective for integration of technology and the need to advance it, and some of the other technologies I'll introduce later, is what's going on in the world. If you take a look at this chart, and I love this chart from Lori Lewis and friends. I think the first one I saw was around 2015. They took a snapshot of what's going on on the internet in 1 minute. There's just millions and billions of things going on any minute, anywhere. So if you're a company like Comcast, you're trying to provide all the conduit, if you will, for all of these things for your customers, because availability and delivering a service is what Comcast does. But if you're also a security provider or like a SOC, like we are, you're looking for ways to either allow or block or filter or screen, whatever it happens to be according to the policy that you're trying to adhere to. So no matter what size the company, they're constantly looking to increase productivity, efficiency, and performance. So naturally, the implementation of new technology can accomplish that. However, while introducing new technology, it's essential in running a successful company is that you have to make the right choices. You have to choose to introduce these technologies and make it a concerted effort to be successful. So I talked a little bit about the pace. What is the pace? What pace of change is right for you and maintaining the CIA? Well, regulatory conditions are a driver. Frameworks, if you're doing an audit or building an audit environment, and the requirements that come from those are what you or your customer need to comply. So what are the rules you're going after? And my background started off in the military. I did acoustic intelligence, classified networks, and all kind of good spooky stuff. I'll tell you some stories in a bit about how we integrated technology there and submarines going under ice and things like that. But we first want to look at like HIPAA, for example. How do you protect protected health information? For the longest time, data was being spilled all over the place, and the bad guys want it, and they want it for one reason. They steal that PHI so that they can make money from it through identity theft. That's the point. Steal your stuff, become you, steal your money. GLBA was was accountability and rules that they put on banking. PCI was created by the credit card industries. There was so much fraud going on, and there still is, that they wanted to set up a standard of rules, how to isolate the environment, using best practices and using things like the CIS 20 and such to measure how well you're protecting that environment. The PCI environment has to be pristine. The downside to not doing it right, failing PCI, is you can't take credit cards. And if that's your lifeline for your company, that means you don't have any revenue. And working with NIST and ISO, for example, for manufacturing. One of my previous lives, I lived as the Global Incident Response Manager for a Fortune 124 company that builds washing machines and dryers and all the good stuff, right? So part of that certification for them was to maintain that NIST standard of safety and security so that their partners and the customers understood that gold star that they got, what it meant. When they did a survey, they said 63% of managers surveyed believe the pace of change is too slow. That was an MIT survey, Sloan Management Review. They said that the obstacle for digital transformation is a lack of urgency. They expressed the benefits of newly introduced tools are poorly communicated. So it's all about creating the story, how you tell it, how you deliver it. So what is CIA and cybersecurity? How does it relate to the integration of technology and the pace of change? I told you confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and how that is and how we measure that. So you have to make sure you consider that in your plan. What additional skill set will you require to integrate this new technology? Have you thought about that? Do you need training? Do you need to send people out to training? In the military, before we did a block upgrade of systems, and I worked in sonar and communications, they would send us to school while the ship was being upgraded. So when we came back, we could jump in and we knew what it was supposed to do and how it was supposed to operate. So we knew what good and what effective looked like. The budget discussions in this case, is this planned or emergency? So is this a software development issue where the software needs to be on a bigger platform that can handle more, or is it hardware driven? Do you have old hardware that's out end of life, or do you need to, do you like some of the new capabilities that hardware solves? Or is it something like ransomware where your hair's on fire because somebody got in and started locking down all your systems? At my previous job as SOC manager, we averaged about 2.5 ransomware responses per month. And what that means is that 2.5 times a month on average, somebody had a bad day. In one particular case, we had a chicken manufacturer down in Mississippi who left a port open where they had opened up a port for a contractor to do some work on one of their systems, not knowing that a bad guy could get through there and through pivoting on different servers and machines could actually get into their environment and release ransomware, which they did. Well, what happened, the downside of that wasn't just that we had to rebuild servers and do that. That's pretty common. That happens a lot. But what happened was those millions of chickens that are being hatched and then being raised up really quick in a matter of 40 to 50 days, ready to be harvested. These were having to be destroyed, so they're losing money. So they can't. Well, this thing couldn't stop. I mean, you can't. Once the eggs are there, they do their thing. They start being hatched, and you got to do something with them. But the point of that is ransomware can reach out and touch you in so many different ways that you won't know what happened. So the topics to include in that conversation. Remember, I just mentioned that communication was one of the things that MIT survey most talked about. So build value and support internally. Don't be in a hurry unless you have to. Mistakes are common when a project is rushed and the appropriate cadence is not established. This is where your PMO can assist, and once started, don't stop. Time is money. And a few tips for actually applying this to your project is the process. Work from the bottom up. When evaluating a new technology, start from the basic level. What's not working is what you want to find out. So what problem are you trying to solve? And then you look at it and you say, what can be expected to change with newly implemented technology and how its success will be measured? So not only do you want to make sure that you got it there and you got it done, but it delivered on what you were either believed or what you were promised, and then rank the priorities and functionality. So you find out of that when you're building this ground up plan, what functional things are most important, what cost savings are most important, but lastly, don't undervalue the user compatibility. One of the most important things is to have happy customers, right? In the Navy, they used to say a happy sailor is what you want because a happy worker works better. Opt for systems that are accessible and intuitive to use. Offer productive support. Once you've chosen what technology you're going to integrate, make sure you have a complete support system for mitigating any difficulties. So have an expert, somebody that you sent off to that training like you did in the military. That person is the answer person. Have them, designate them, figure out ways that people can reach them, text, phone call, email, whatever it is. Designate those people and make it widely known in your company communications that this is the person who's the answer person. And if they can't find an answer, they will know who to go to. Move away from thick paper manuals and opt for programs that have easily accessible digital help centers. So use kiosks, use web apps, QR codes that bring up information that everybody can use. If the intended audience feels intimidated when your launch comes around, so people are afraid of it, you're in trouble because they won't touch it. They won't want to experiment with it. And if they can't access it because you forgot to ensure that the accessibility was easy and intuitive, then you're going to have the implementation could fail. Be flexible, but not uncertain. People can always tell when somebody doesn't know what they're doing. If you get somebody in a baseball game and you throw them a fastball and they duck out of the way, you know that they, if it's not aimed at their head, that they probably haven't had too many thrown at their head before. So be transparent. And part of that communication that we were talking about is, according to the APA, only 50% of employees believe their employer is upfront and open about things. So I would be remiss if I didn't throw a little security stuff in there. And people think that just because you have HTTPS in your browser that everything is safe. Well, the common TCP/IP connection does the three-way handshake, means no data is transmitted before that, but there's data about the data that is not protected. So, for example, the number of times the conversation has occurred, with whom you talked, so what website you went to, Facebook, Gmail, anything you want to do. Go back to that wheel, any one of those you connected to. They also have how often do you talk to people? How many times do you, like on Facebook or other social media, how many times do you do that? How many Twitters, the tweets? The ability to estimate the size of the message sent so it can tell how much data is moving between, and that may make you a bigger target, right? And the IP address is exposed, and your location, where you're coming from. An example down here at the bottom with HTTPS, vulnerable host, I highlighted authorized token and the expire. Both of those would expose, because those are queries inside the string, would expose data like what's above it, and you would understand that, hey, this stuff went out, and the bad guys would know. Just because it says HTTPS doesn't mean you're not saying something. You're not. It's like metadata, right? The data about data exposed on the internet is the things like this, using this type of string that where things are exposed. One of the things, my early career with the government after I got out of the military, was running IDS systems from Columbus, Ohio, globally for a government system. And one of the things that we saw often was passwords in clear text. People didn't realize that the passwords were in the clear text because they put them in the wrong box, or they didn't do the process correctly. And so that exposed the government to risks. So as a security practitioner, those are the things where we'd have to get the boss involved and say, hey, did you know the user so-and-so is doing this kind of thing? Or maybe they forgot their password and they were trying to figure it out. Now I want to introduce you to a topic that you probably all know something about, but hopefully I can introduce you to some ways this technology is being used today, and new technologies and new streams. Blockchain. We've all heard of blockchain. Became famous in cryptocurrency, and even the stock market using it, because at any given time, blockchain is a technology that, of course, behind Bitcoin, but was where that a change in one spot becomes a change in all spots. It's essentially a form of record keeping and can be used in almost any product that uses some form of record keeping. Um, uh, Blockchain is ideal for protecting any data that needs to be unalterable and indestructible. So traditionally, the data were kept on a server that's owned and operated by a third party. The approach has some disadvantages. The third party gets breached and you get breached. The data block sets are permanently recorded, so financial transactions, etc. The information is first hashed in such a way as to represent the data in a compact format where the data can be easily compared for any changes. Any small change in the data completely changes the hash version, which makes the comparison very easy. So using hashing technology, the blockchain environment understands when something was changed. And if it wasn't verified, which on the right-hand side of this screen shows a verified transaction, then the system knows that, hey, this is not good, and it'll reject it. So industries using blockchain. Banks, they use it to digitize and secure and tamper-proof ledgers. Messaging apps like Ton, Line, Telegram, and Kik. Hedge funds, Numerai, Quantopian, and others. Voting, Internet ID, critical infrastructure, and ride sharing. So getting into some of this, everybody knows how banking uses digitized, secure, tamper-proof ledgers and blockchain around the world, right? So we understand that one. But where you get into the ones like messaging apps, you find that encrypted messaging app Telegram, for example, raised 1.7 billion from private investors before canceling the sale and decided to stay with its initial coin offering of 1.2 billion. Kik has raised, the chat platform Kik has raised over 100 million via an ICO, which is the initial coin offering, in its app currency. And Line, which is Japan's most popular message service, is reportedly planning to expand into cryptocurrency trading. So they're going to take something that was a messaging app and use it for trading. Hedge funds. This is the one that I talked about, Numerai and Quantopian. I didn't realize that they were going to use the data extrapolated from blockchain to actually use behavioral technologies and to do ways to invest. So helping to predict where funds were going to go. So Numerai sends like thousands of located quants, encrypted data sets, and asks them to build predictive models. So they go out and all these different entities will build predictive models wherever they are in the world, and they'll feed back to Numerai. And if they like it, they take the strategy and create a meta model that makes the trades in some way. It's like a blockchain-based spin for rewarding data scientists. So basically they go out and they have this data all over the world. People do data mining against it and are able to predict where to invest. Another upcoming one that will be near and dear to us probably in November is with voting. Obviously, voting needs to be tamper-proof and reliable. The challenges with voting is in the identity. How do you prove the person on the other end is who they say they are? If they're a registered voter, how do they get their token or whatever it is that makes them difficult to track? But we need one person, one vote. So elections require authentication, and identity is the weak part in that. In the future, blockchain tools could serve as infrastructure for casting, tracking, and counting votes, potentially eliminating the need for recounts, because it's once it's done, it's tamper-proof, right? By capturing votes as transactions through blockchain, the governments and voters would have a verifiable audit trail, ensuring no votes are changed or removed, and no illegitimate votes were added. Internet ID and DNS. Platforms like blockchain and Uport think that Blockstack, and Uport think that they're a future where your identity can easily be carried with you around the internet. So the idea is that you are who you say you are, and it travels with you, is being explored by IBM. So IBM released a blockchain-enabled identity management tool called IBM Verify, and the decentralized system, which is the key, allows certain trusted organizations to issue credentials to users, who then can use the credentials to prove who they are wherever they go on the internet, because they have this digital certificate basically in blockchain that says who they are. Critical infrastructure. This is one near and dear to me, because in my initial start of my PhD, one of the things I had to do, besides the dissertation, which I opted not to do, was to be published. So I worked with a partner who was a PhD professor at University of Cincinnati, and I was asked to write a chapter on critical infrastructures on dams and waterways. And some people would think, well, just besides pure water, right? You don't want to contaminate the water supply. What other kind of risks are there? Well, in a particular instance in Russia, I believe it was 1991, they had somebody hack into one of their dams that was a power generating dam that had, I believe it was 6 turbo generators inside that produced electricity. A hacker was able to get in through a back door for a small little system that they had that was for accounting or something, and was able to actually access the motors for the dam. And they spun one of them up so high that it exploded and blew a hole in the dam. So if you search on there in the internet, you'll find the pictures that they're also in the book that I wrote the chapter on. Was be careful who you let into your network, because you never know what the downside is. I mean, they probably didn't realize somebody could ever get in there and intentionally overspin the turbo generators and make them explode. So this company Zage uses advanced cryptologic techniques. And look them up. They seem like they're all over it. They're employing blockchain tamper-proof ledgers to share security data between devices for industrial stuff. When I was in the military, we did a lot of top secret and other types of communication. And one of the things that we used that I thought was really cool back in the day was frequency hopping. We'd have 2 systems, a ship to ship or ship to shore or shore to shore, whichever. Once they could connect it up and were authorized to talk to each other, the crypto systems would use a technology called frequency hopping, where one device would tell the other device, hey, I'm going to shift in 3 seconds to this frequency, meet me there. and they would continually hop back and forth all over with these frequencies while maintaining the integrity to transfer the data between one to the other. The idea there was is if the bad guys listening in missed 1%, 2%, 5%, 10% of that data, then they would never get the whole picture. So think, for example, if the government and the military was trying to transfer plans between tactical movements in an exercise or in a war zone, and the bad guy could only get a percentage of it instead of the whole picture, then the plan still has a good chance of getting through. Also, things like one-time passwords and more. And blockchain is even reaching out to ride sharing. A startup company called Arcade City, for example, facilitates all transactions through a blockchain system. Arcade City operates similarly to ride-sharing companies, but allows drivers to establish their rates. So you get to take charge of what you're charging. If you're driving the car, you can charge what you want instead of those surges and things that you see with Lyft and Uber. One reminds me of a couple years ago, I was in Arizona at my brother's house watching Super Bowl, and I was ready to go back to my hotel downtown Phoenix. And because of the peak time, I got charged like 3 times what it should have been. I wasn't a happy camper. But Arcade City will allow the driver to actually be like an independent contractor, where he can adjust his rates according to what he thinks that the customer will pay. Blockchain even reaches out to advertising on the internet. In 2017, the company Brave crowdfunded $35 million in 30 seconds during its basic attention token, right? The BAT. It's an initial coin offering that they put on the internet, geared towards compensating advertisers and users. So instead of the middleman like Google or Facebook, the advertisers would list directly on Brave's blockchain-based browser. Users who opt in receive fewer but better targeted ads without malware, and advertisers get a better idea of their spending. So another company along that line too was Snovio. It's another option that lets people sell their personal data and gain SNOV tokens. So that was just one of the things that 35 million in 30 seconds is good coin. I'd like a little bit of that. Crypto exchanges are also big. Obviously, they use bad guys using crypto mining, where they hijack your environment and use your CPU cycles to do crypto mining. But one way blockchain reduces conventional risk is by simply removing the need for human intermediaries. It lessens the threat of hacking, corruption, or human error. And ironically, some of the blockchain's most successful companies are fairly centralized middlemen. In other words, instead of being decentralized, which is what blockchain is famous for, they actually get together and put things in exchange on blockchain. A high-profile company project there is called Enigma, which claims MIT and Flybridge Capital as supporters. The developer of Catalyst, an off-chain decentralized exchange and investment platform that works without the need of a third party to act as a clearinghouse. Another high-profile decentralized exchange is Ethereum-based Ox. Another is education and academia. Sony and IBM to share their records. Well, we found, and as you've seen in the news recently about rich people being able to buy their kids' education into high-profile schools and such. Not only that a problem, but the problem also is once you get a degree, how do you know the degree is as good as what you say it is? So they're trying to put serialized credentials together so that blockchain technology can be used so that a prospective employer or another college, university can verify and check that the education and the credentials are what you say they are. Sony and IBM got together and they're learning to share those records, and they're launching a product called Block Search for open infrastructure for academic credentials. That way they can share those and they know that what they are is what they actually say they are. Because, like I said many times, this is a tamper-proof environment. Moving on to car leasing and car rentals. One of the things that the experience with leasing and buying, especially now during COVID-19, is selling a vehicle is a fragmented process. There's a lot of problems that maybe bounce checks, people's credentials, etc. Well, now they're able to use blockchain technology to actually immediately contract people, provide insurance to the customer, actually using something like one of the online ones you see, Carvana and others, to actually bring the vehicle to you and do all the paperwork, almost no touch. And that's an advantage. That's a new whole line of business. And now with everybody locked down, if you want to buy a car, you can pretty much do it without ever touching anything that potentially could be infected. Industrial Internet of Things and mesh technology. Adept is called autonomous decentralized peer-to-peer telemetry. IBM and Samsung are working on that. I had some initial exposure to initial IoT back in the day at that manufacturing company I talked about earlier, where when they were first launching their refrigerators and washing machines and dryers and such, with the ability to phone home whenever they needed parts, when they're doing checking for updated software, etc., they were pretty exposed because they didn't have good security around the Bluetooth technology that they were using. So industrial IoT takes this and mesh networking a little further. So they're trying to figure out ways to make that secure. And finally, cloud storage. Blockchain cloud storage solutions allow storage to be decentralized, which is good, therefore less prone to attacks and can cause systemic damage and widespread data loss. So bad guys trying to use technology to wipe out a data center, et cetera, right? Enterprises that offer cloud storage often secure customer data in a centralized server. So you got one server that can be exposed, and if you are a cloud storage provider, you have multiple servers in one area that potentially could be hacked or knocked offline or destroyed. Then what are you going to do, right? How are you going to take care of that? A company called Storage offers a blockchain-enabled cloud storage network to improve security and lower the transaction costs of storing information in the cloud. So we know that you can fail over from one cloud to another, et cetera. But if you have servers and processes running in Azure, for example, with a bunch of storage, you know that they can rack up CPU cycles that cost a lot of money. So Storage and Siacoin have offered blockchain enabled at a much lower cost. So hopefully some of those blockchain technology things are things that many of you or some of you may want to look into as probably revenue shares or something that you might want to look into. Some more examples of technology that are emerging. As we all know, that technology authentication is always a hard one. The inadequacies of username and passwords are well known. A more secure form of authentication is needed. One method is to bake authentication into a user's hardware. Intel is doing it, along with others, in combining part of the authentication process into a process of the motherboard or the CPU. So that really helps a lot. And also they use, in the motherboard, you can use tracking. At my previous job downtown Chicago, we actually enabled a system on the motherboards that would track the device. So if it was stolen, we could go on the web. We could say, hey, look out for this. As soon as the thing phoned home, we would know where it was. And we actually had to use it one time when somebody's laptop was stolen on the train heading from Naperville downtown Chicago. And we activated the process, and a couple of days later we got a call, and there was a notification that the laptop was found at a pawn shop. And when we went, the police went with us to the pawn shop, and we talked to them. We showed them that we purchased it, we owned it. That therefore they looked at it and they were able to track down the guy, and they arrested the guy for theft. It was a $2,000 laptop. But you could tell in the past that Intel had previous efforts to dedicate a portion of their chipset for security functions. But now authentication requires the three things from the user: what they know, such as a password, who they are, such as username, and what they have, such as a token. In the case of Authenticate, the device becomes what you have. So you don't have to carry a fob around with you. User behavior analytics is another emerging technology. You typically in security, you look for something that's different. But once someone's username and password are compromised and they're on the network, how do you know from behavior analytics that the bad guy has done this if the person didn't know that their credentials were stolen? So whoever has stolen them can waltz right into your network and engage in all kinds of bad stuff. This can trigger a red flag if the system knows what normal looks like. The technology that uses big data analytics to identify anomalous user, by their behavior. User activity is one of the main drivers in our tool, for example, as well, where we look for that and machine learning and artificial intelligence to combine to look for threats and to be ready to respond to those. The technology addresses blind spot and enterprise security. Once an attacker gains entry into an enterprise, what happens then, right? One of the first things they do is compromise credentials, so that the question becomes, can you differentiate between a legitimate guy and a bad guy? Who has, when he gained entry, what did he do? Where did he go and all that, right? So visibility into the activity that does not fit the norm of a legitimate user is where you look, right? So comparing a user's present behavior to past isn't the only way the UBA can identify a malicious actor. There's something called peer analysis, which it compares how someone is behaving compared to people with the same manager in the same department. So not only if somebody's hacked in and like an accounting department or something, they know how the people should behave, what they should access, what they shouldn't access, their time of day, even things like keystrokes for passwords, et cetera, and the rate of typing, et cetera. So they can also tell that an indicator that a person is doing something they shouldn't be. So insider threat becomes able to be detected as well. People going to where they shouldn't, downloading things they shouldn't. It's a valuable tool for training employees also in security practices, because certain thresholds and triggers can be had when somebody goes and does something that they shouldn't. But the beautiful part of it now is like with phishing training. If you have phishing training, like we use Ningio, if you look in there and you read it and somebody fails the test or whatever, or fails the phishing test, it automatically takes them to a training site where they have to sit through a 10 or 15-minute training thing to explain what they did, why it was wrong, and what happened, right? Another area that's emerging technologies using blockchain in some of it is data loss prevention. Data loss prevention uses typically encryption and tokenization. Encryption, of course, is the code, and tokenization is breaking it into pieces and substituting something, characters for other characters, et cetera, that protect data down to the field and subfield level. Cyber attackers cannot monetize data in the event of a successful breach. So if you take an EMC array or something, and like in my former life at the dental insurance company, we had a huge EMC array that had hundreds of millions of dental claims filed in there and records, et cetera. In order for that to be successful, somebody would have to break into the data center. They had to steal, I think we calculated it as 27 individual drives. They would have to put them into another exact array with the same software and be able to reconstitute that data. So once we added encryption to that, it would be impossible. They could have all of it. They could even take the whole array out with them, and without the password to decrypt stuff, the data was pretty safe, and it passed our HIPAA high trust certification. Data also, when using data loss prevention and tokenization, allows the data to be securely moved and used across the extended enterprise. Business processes and analytics can be performed on the data because the system knows how to detokenize and decrypt it to use it. So that's the key. Enterprises can be greatly aided in compliance to data privacy and security regulations as well. So keeping track, you know where the data went and what it did and you can prove a negative. So there's a lot of security spending over the last few years, and the number of records breached it goes up considerably every year. But what about authentication? What do you do with authentication? How do you understand that it's safe and secure? One of the guys that I learned with, along with Eric Cole early on with the SANS Institute, was um, a statement by John Pescatore. Says that, hey, there can't be strong encryption without a key management system. True, you have to have the key somewhere, and there can't be strong key management without encryption. So it's the chicken or the egg scenario, right? So more examples are deep learning. And in the XDR platform that we offer, deep learning is one of the fundamentals of it. And basically, deep learning encompasses a number of technologies, such as artificial intelligence and machine learning. So when you combine those, and we use behavior analysis and all the other things from the security endpoints and tools that we ingest and add it all together, then you get which is called deep learning. So deep learning is understanding what malicious behavior looks like, how it deviates from legitimate or acceptable behavior. And when you're looking at activity on an enterprise network, there's behavior that's not behavior, but it's still malicious. So even if you're looking at behavior, it looks slightly different, the application for behavior analytics. So an authorized person doing unauthorized things always comes to mind, and I teach my SOC analysts to look for those things. So instead of looking at users, the systems nowadays start to look at entities. Entities can be a group, can be a team. It can even be a guy from Booz Allen said the exact business analytics can even be a data center. A data center operates a certain way. There's a certain hum, there's a certain cadence that a data center has that becomes its own, where it's different than somewhere else. And using machine learning and artificial intelligence, you can see when those particular behaviors are outside the norm. And basically, it's an alerting technique, right? The analysts are looking for things that are out of the norm, because the whole point of having security is to allow people who are authorized to do authorized things without interruption or danger to that data, keeping it secret, safe, like I said, and getting it done. So the data center is an entity. So think of it outside of just a server, a row of servers, or racks. And lastly, we'll talk about the cloud. The cloud is transformative. There's new things happen all the time. I remember back in the day when it was just single, Linux servers, Unix servers, ESXi hosts, etc. And then we started adding containerization, and we started doing buckets and blocks and containers. So more organizations are going to use the cloud. So whatever you're offering when you're talking about integrating technologies is to see what your customer needs, where they're going, what is that problem? Do they want to maintain a data center? Do they want to rent from a data center that's private? Do they want to have a public cloud? There's a lot of business drivers on each of those that will answer those questions. You'll know that infrastructure as a service is a booming enterprise, because people don't want to have to hire the high dollar system admins to run the systems when they can get it on a batch or a shared principle. Just like a CISO role today, you can actually do a virtual CISO, and you can get some of the benefits of, like, my knowledge from and share it part-time if you can't afford a full-time CISO. So hopefully that's some of the technologies out there, and I hope that there's some of the ones that are new to you, and that you'll research some of those and be able to maybe ask some questions or follow up. These definitely are areas that and the entrepreneurial type of salesperson can look at ways on some of these technologies and more. And if you just do a Google search, you'll find there's hundreds of these startup companies moving more towards blockchain because of the inherent security advantages of it. So hopefully that there was something in there for you. And lastly, I want to show you what an integrated technology really looks like. This is the dashboard for our Overwatch XDR platform, meaning it sucks in everything and becomes the detection and response tool. So not subject to only endpoints or just managed detection and response, so EDR, MDR. This actually is XDR, which is everything. We ingest it, we process it, we enrich it. Our security and network delivery tools actually convert it to JSON, so it's a small stream, but it looks for 13 or 14 other things outside of your typical net flow. So just quickly for here, just for an introduction to you, for you, is we have integrated basically an asset management tool. So on the left-hand side over here, this is all the assets that the tool has detected, and this was actually a snapshot from a test environment that we actually have on the internet that's being beat up. We have applications in Azure, G Suite, and other places around the world. And what you're seeing right there is the little honeypots that have applications that are being hacked, and these actual hacks are real time. A lot of times you'll see a POC where they, what I call horsing the test. They'll go in there and they'll create an artificial situation to show that their tool is the best thing since sliced bread. But over here on the left-hand side is the assets, and it'll tell you what the security risk from the center to 100, and it's less risk the further out you go. And underneath the 100 risk score there, you have the IP address, obviously. Underneath it is the kill chain, which is in the center, and I'll explain in a moment. And it tells you the number of events or alerts from this particular asset in a given period of time. And you can adjust the time interval on that to see what it is. You get a month, week, a day, an hour, 5 minutes, etc. In the center is the Lockheed Martin kill chain, which starts with reconnaissance and ends in exfiltration. So this is the steps it would go through when you're getting a ransomware attack, right? Originally, they did some reconnaissance. They found a hole. They found a way in. They deployed it. Underneath here, you can't see the other two, which are when the person clicks on the link and they get infected, they phone home to a CNC site, they get the bad guy. So you got Drydex or something getting us in here, and then they download Reuk right here, and then Reuk deposits itself here. It starts encrypting the environment. So that's what it would look like in an environment. So you see 17 anomalous, meaning they're detected but not fully understood. 25 of them in this test environment, we understood exactly what the risk and the threat was so that we could work on it. And each one of these in our environment, and if you want a demo, we can set up a demo for you folks. Actually click on, everything's clickable, and all of these little eyes you see, like where my cursor is now on the right hand side, means that you can drill down. So you can drill down like 5 or 6 levels, write custom queries, you can do webhooks, you can do automatic email, all the good stuff. But the integration, back to that, is here in the center with the connectors that we have out of the box. We have AWS, Office, G Suite, Okta, which is Identity and Access Management, vulnerability scanners out of the box, Active Directory, and this one is you'll wonder, you say, well, you have Office 365 up there, but we also have an Active Directory agent looking and monitoring just the schema. So the Active Directory schema, when it is under duress or under attack, you can actually see here this agent would return that to us so that the critical asset that we're monitoring, we would know what's going on. And the right-hand side, quickly, is almost like the magic quadrant. Up over in the right-hand side in the top means that the fidelity, which is the number of events, number of times that particular event has happened in a given period of time, and moving left to right is the severity of it all. So up here, top here, where this little red dot is, that's a bad guy, and it means that this guy came down here with a 97 score, and this guy here is doing DNS tunneling, and somebody should look at it. We also use this as a way to aggregate from all the customers. We can see where the threats are coming from. We click on this and we can actually notify through our ticketing system or our alert system, whatever is set up with the customer. We can actually also, using this tool with some of its automated capabilities, it uses SOAR technology to do things like firewall blocks, Active Directory user block accounts, removing devices, et cetera. Whatever you want to do, we can configure it to do it. But this just tells you what's happened over the last period of time. So other than that, this is just an example of how we have included Cyber Event Manager, Patch Management, Vulnerability Management, Endpoint, Asset, Privilege, and Knowledge Base all into one tool. And hopefully whatever technology you're looking to integrate, some of the steps and some of the processes I've given you today are good enough for you, and you can learn something from that. Shoot us a note and let us know. And if you want to talk further about our capabilities and what we have to offer or partnering with us, we'd be happy to talk to you about that. Susanna, back to you.
Thank you so much, Phil. If you guys don't, well, you probably don't realize, but this is Phil's third session of the day. We started at 10 a.m. Central, and he's had a couple breaks in between, but He's really dedicated the entire day to offer these courses to us. So thank you so much, Phil. We do have two questions, Phil, from our attendees today, our enrollees. The first question, this person is asking, are you suggesting MSPs should offer blockchain solutions to their customers? And if so, how?
Well, I think blockchain is just one of the possible revenue streams and technologies that people should look at. If a company is inclined to want to take on new and emerging technologies, blockchain definitely is one of the ones that they should look at. If they support communications, right? So Line and the other ones, Ton, and some of the other ones that I mentioned, would be good places to start. But also looking into blockchain technology and see if it fits their stack and their business strategy. But I would not exclude blockchain from a potential revenue stream. So if you have the skill set and you have the desire, I would definitely say, yeah, take a look at it. Find a partner that's into it and can get it done. Or if you do it yourself and start seeing, test the waters. I think this is a very untapped environment as far as revenue stream goes for MSPs and providers, that there's a lot of money to be made here because of the security that's built into it inherently.
Awesome, and who doesn't want to make more money, right? As the second question that came in, I am an MSP. With all of these emerging technologies you mentioned, where do I even start?
Wow. Okay. Good question. I think where you start is what is the problem you're trying to solve? Remember from the first couple of slides is you're trying to help a customer solve a problem. Find out what their pain point is and then look at it holistically. Start from the bottom up, the ground up, right? I always recommend starting with external first, so outside in. Make sure the firewalls, make sure any of the access things like identity and access management and single sign-on, all of those things that allow authentication and the ability for a user to access, get in or out, or doing business between customers, start with authentication and start with the firewalls. Make sure the outside is firm. Then that buys you time to take the chewy center part and actually make it better. So you do things like encryption, you do CIS benchmark. I strongly recommend running CIS benchmark internal with the customers, not only as a way to see if the configurations are good, but if you're an MSP and looking for chances to upsell, you get a lot of T&M on configuring and upgrading servers based on technology like CIS. You get a subscription to CIS, you run the tool, and it tells you what needs to be done. You can also look at pen testing. You can look at other things that are revenue generating. But remember what's driving them. It's either a business need for revenue generation, or it's a regulation like HIPAA, PCI, et cetera, that's driving the change, or it's the SDLC hardware life cycle. So their end of life is a big driver for and a great opportunity for somebody to get in and help with new technology when they have to replace it.
All right, it looks like we're running out of time now. Just a couple things before we wrap up. Again, we are offering CPE credit for those of you who take the certification exam. You will get an email later this week. If you haven't yet signed up for our partner portal, the email will have a detailed step-by-step process on how to access our portal. Registration for the remaining 7 courses are now online on our homepage. So if you haven't yet signed up for them, feel free to go ahead and sign up for all 7. Some of you have already done that, so that's great. The next course, which is Security303, is about Zero Trust. Stan touched on it 2 weeks ago, the fact that we are moving away from trust but verify and heading towards don't trust anyone. And so David Barton, our CTO, will go into greater detail about what all that means. Again, that is coming up in 2 weeks, 2 weeks from today. Until then, I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy, and we're excited to continue to offer these courses. And feel free to share the links with your friends and your customers. We'd love to help out in that way. So thank you so much. Have a great day, guys.